On this episode, we're talking about leadership, logistics, and coaching with a fellow focal point business coach. Take a step with us on the perfect route. Welcome to the show, everybody. I hope you're having a good day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. We've got an interesting guest today, one of my fellow focal point coaches, Luis Perez. How are you doing?
Hey, Bill, good to see you. Great
Good to see you.
here with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you too. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your coaching practice?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Guatemala. I came to the US about 47 years ago, and I realized that my passion is really working with people. And so my entire career, 35 years, I've worked with organizations and leading groups and teams very much globally dispersed. And I realized that the value that I certainly bring to organizations is really bringing people together, to work in a team. And obviously, discretionary effort was something that I discovered was very valuable. I worked at different levels of the organization, from C-level to entry level in different industries, and realized that if I'm going to be continuing to enjoy that, coaching was really a perfect transition for me. As an executive coach today, and I work with individuals, executives, as well as business owners to help them in five things, trying to make their team develop better skills, grow their organization, and develop strategic plans, and try to come up with better tools and ways to do things. And the fifth thing, which I think is very interesting to me, is how to balance their lives. Everybody
Mhm.
first out. So, so that's a little bit about myself. My background is really an engineer with an MBA, but at the end of the day, I tell people I'm a disciple of learning and experiencing and putting things in action. So that's a little bit about myself.
Well, thank you. Your background as an engineer always intrigued me because and I think this is a good thing. You don't come off in person as an engineer.
That's interesting comment because I started my education as a chemical engineer, and I didn't see myself working in that profession because it's
Right.
very analytical and is very much working in labs and in environments that really don't have as much interaction. They have interaction with people, but
Mhm.
I switched to industrial engineering. And the reason why I did that is because the industrial engineering discipline interacts with people, with groups,
Mhm.
organizations. And so I started working doing that specifically in the logistics space. And if anybody that knows anything about logistics, you know that logistics really interacts with just about every function in a company. And that's really people interactions. So that's how I kind of transitioned from being an engineer to working with people. And certainly where I kind of started enjoying more and more doing the work was really when I started dealing with people. I deal with people all over the world, cultures, which is I think there's a common thing I realized, if you treat people with respect and you give them the tools and you empower them, people will flourish. So I subscribe to the servant leadership discipline. I believe that we work for our people. If our people are successful, results will come out and we all will win. So that's how I kind of transition from being an engineer to
Okay.
my engineering skills, obviously, because analytical skills are very valuable too. But yes,
It is. You've got a great blend of the analytical side of being an engineer, but also recognizing the importance of teams and community in not only crafting solutions, but getting them implemented well.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think, when I look at clients and I work with organizations, I realize that everybody has great knowledge and great experience. But you hit a word here that's key, implementation, right? Implementation is about really being aligned as a team, right? Cross-functional teams. They all have great plans, great strategies. Where I think they fall short is in the execution, and the execution is all about aligning
Hmm.
the key objectives, the values, the missions, and the organizations don't have that clarity of that. And so starting with that and then putting those in action and making them simple, right? I'm a practical person. I tell people don't use a lot of buzzwords, just make it real, come up with priorities that you really have and then put actions to go move the needle. I also believe that execution is not about execution of a grandiose, transformational plan. It's about executing the steps to get to that next level, right? The process, I tell clients, you're going to learn something. right? You're probably going to have to change it. You're going to have to flex it. But the value is that you're proving what works for you, right? It's not what somebody else is going to tell you. This is, if you do this, you're going to have the great revelation of what you wanted to do or what you wanted to be when your company became bigger. So I think small steps, executing and aligning the teams is key.
Okay. What are some other aspects of what your ideal client looks like? Are you um, working across different industries
Yeah.
or yeah?
Yeah, actually, great question, right? Because when you become certified as a coach, they tell you to come up with your ideal client. And yes, my ideal client is really in the logistics space. It's the small to medium sized 5 to $75 million logistics companies because that's where my background is. Interesting enough, so I'm going out and try to prospect in that space. If you know any company that makes a product or a service has something to do with logistics. So
Hmm.
that opens the door to pretty broad set of industry sectors. Today, I coach logistics companies. I coach a small startup company. I mean, different types of businesses. I'm part of the Chamber of Commerce here in Florida. And those are small businesses. At the end of the day, the processes are the same. The concepts are the same. It's just how are you going to apply them to help those business owners and executives to go out and do things? So logistics is my background, but I think that pretty much opens the door to a lot of industries and general processes that I end up applying you know, to help my clients become more efficient and more successful.
And it's a very good framework to look at business from the logistics perspective. I've been involved with organizations that, swore up and down, oh, we don't do logistics. We don't think in those terms, in terms of, and what I worked in primarily was services, but there's a fair amount of logistics that goes on in services. And that's always fascinated me.
Yeah.
So it just strikes me that you've got a really effective point to flip people's thinking.
Then what's interesting is I tell people that because when you become a coach, you think that you have to know a lot, that you have to know the client's business. Frankly, you don't, right? So what I leverage is, as you know, we went through certification. The three things that we have to leverage as coaches is number one is our expertise, where we have a certain depth of expertise. The other one is certainly the training and certification we got from Focal Point. And the third one is the network that we have, whether that's the network of coaches that we're part of or industry contacts that we have, to put those to use to solve problems for clients. And the most important thing that I end up doing with clients is listening, right?
Hmm.
Because when you go in there, it's like it's a big world, right? I mean, the
Hmm.
world opens and you don't know what this client is really going to be telling you. So listening, understanding what their priorities are, what their pain points are, and then focusing on those because you're going to work on on their business, not on what you're trying to bring to them. As a coach, is try to help them on their challenges and focusing on those, and then that will take you to broader things in their business, and that's why relationships kind of flourish, with clients because then they tend to be a longer term relationship because as soon as you walk in there, you realize that there's just no one priority, and so you
Hmm.
try to get him to kind of focus on one and start with that prove results, take steps, and then broaden to other things that connect to that priority.
It's an important part of the client's journey to help them build the capabilities that they already have. They just may not be using them as effectively as they could.
Right. The interesting thing you bring up a good point because clients have the answers, but what
Mhm.
sometimes they don't have is the clarity on how to organize them, how to put them into a plan, and how to take the steps to get them into implementation or execution. That's what I was saying earlier, right? Sometimes clients think, it's a big transformation of a process, technology. And frankly, when you start looking at those transformations or big projects or initiatives, really, it's a set of steps or sub initiatives that they need to kind of start taking them to get to the next level. And the other thing too is there's no one plan that's really going to give you the answer from now until 3 to 5 years, right? I mean, that's just drafting a plan that will get you started. But think about it as you go through it, be ready to flex, change, adjust, iterate, right? To perfect that And the other thing that really comes into the picture is we live in a world that's continuously changing more now than before. Technology comes into the conversation, right? And that kind of brings you up into, by the time you started and you end up with something completely different because new things have come up that you need to consider in that solution of a client's problem, right? But flexibility is important. Think of very basic things, processes. Results are important, certainly for a coach, right? I mean, I tell people, I'm not here to go out and tell you that we're going to double your company's revenue and change what you're doing. But it's really about understanding what those priorities are that they want to follow, right? Some of them might want to sell their company. Some of them might want to grow them. Some of them might want to just drive efficiency in one area. But I think focusing on that and making sure that that client puts the effort and time into that, whether that's resources or time, is important. That's just, you know, the approach I use. And to your point, trying to make sure that you leverage that knowledge and put it to use for the client and keep it simple, right?
Mm.
Execution is important, right? Obviously, results comes out of that. And try to kind of give them results is important, right? Because they want to see what's the return on the investment for the time that they're investing on a coach like myself or yourself, right? We try to emphasize on that. And for that, I think taking smaller steps is important, right? So you don't start waiting 2 years, 3 years from now to try to get results.
Hmm. Yeah. And that timeline is also important because clients have expectations. They need to see results right away. Starting with a single pain point or a single problem is a way to get there on the path, but it's like a network diagram. It starts forking out. And part of what we do as coaches is help guide clients on that journey through that network of ideas because we have a limited amount of time every day and it's not possible to hit all the problems. We just have to select the areas for improvement that will yield results on a reasonable timeline.
Yeah, exactly. And that's to the point, right? Working on the customer's priorities, right? On their
Hmm.
wishes. Um, which brings me to another comparison. Sometimes coaches get confused with consultants, right? And we're not consultants, right? Consultants have a place in this world. They go out and solve problems and deliver solutions. Coaches basically help you get to those answers and solutions, right? Meaning as a client. And what I found is that clients really have the answers, like I said earlier, right? But they're not able to kind of put things together, maybe because the time constraints is not because they're not intelligent. They're extremely intelligent and successful people. But, having a trusted advisor that comes in and helps them kind of see, you know, things in a different perspective, share ideas that come from experience, knowledge, that is that's the value of a coach. I tell people that, at the senior level executive or the owner, it's a lonely life because they don't
Hmm.
anybody that they can confide or run things with. And then that time. So that's sort of like the role of the coach. And that's why we're here. Certainly again, we have experience, certifications, disposition of other trusted advisors or referrals that we can put in touch with them to help them kind of solve problems. And that value is tremendous. I think if you really, people ask me, I think every executive probably should have a coach. You know,
Hmm.
people, yeah, you learn, you progress, you get experience, but you don't have that breadth. And you're learning it as you're going along. And as a coach, I think you can help a client fast track, their success, because trying to help them, give him guidance, being a sounding board, giving them some of the knowledge and experience that we've already achieved in our lives will fast track that, that their career.
Yeah. And, I'm glad you brought up the community of focal point coaches because we've got 300 colleagues who all have different coaching practices, but they've got a wide variety of experience. And it's easy for us as coaches to leverage that network to benefit our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, partnering, I partner with other coaches where I've gone out and, if they have expertise in one area that I don't, and they can complement what I'm doing and bring them in and we collaborate. And obviously that's value to the client, right? Because he's going to get other subject matter experts that can help in specific areas of their business where maybe I have the knowledge, but not the depth that somebody else has. So that's a value also that a client gets from engaging with a focal point coach. So,
Mhm. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I took up the focal point opportunity is I knew from my own experience as a consultant that, I don't have all the answers and I need a community that I can lean into to help me find more of those answers than I could on my own.
right. Yep.
We've been talking about the general framework of coaching, and are there any recent initiatives or engagements that you've had that you feel truly captured the strategic potential of business coaching?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, talking about coaching and technology, AI, I have a client, I won't disclose his name for confidentiality reasons, but I have a client in the logistics space. Anybody that knows any much about the logistics space knows that it's a very manual industry. They do a lot of stuff through documents, manual phone calls, and very much people are the ones that drive the processes there. So anyway, in the process, as I went in there coaching the COO, he identified that the growth, sales, and marketing was an area that he needed help with because he was in a growth mode. He was growing, but he wasn't growing in an organized way. They serve the Central America region, and they have a great business. They made acquisitions, but they were like, "Hey, how do we grow here? We have more opportunities, but we're not organized." And in the process, too, as I had started working with him, I realized, hey, which I kind of knew this because I spent 35 years in the logistics space, but you have a lot of manual work here. And if you're going to grow, you might want to implement some tools here that could help you grow in a more efficient way, an automated way. So we looked at AI, and AI is helping them now with taking phone calls, on the call center, following up on a track and trace when somebody asked him, where's my product, where's my package, they talk to a bot agent, they call it, right? An AI agent, don't talk to a person anymore. So that has completely changed his way of thinking of how he could leverage technology and to put it to use in his company. This company is over 100 years old. So you can just see they grew up very successful people, family, business, but they only knew what they managed to put together themselves. And I think as a coach, I'm fortunate, I guess, to really have worked in with other coaches and as well as other companies that I'm able to kind of bring some of these ideas to him and put him to work on their priority, the priority of growth, the priority of bringing more customers. But in that process, it's not just bringing customers, but how do you bring them in an efficient way so you maintain the margin, for that client? The six industry margin is tight in some sectors. And so he needs to be thinking, efficiencies, cost containments. And so all of a sudden he's enamored with AI. He wants to know more about it. And, which actually is interesting because we are all learning about AI as we're speaking, right? I mean, there's a new thing and you hear things from like, it's going to replace your job to you better think about it, what AI is going to do to you. And I look at it in a different way. Like I told the CEO, you need to think about how AI can augment what you're doing, right?
Mhm.
In the logistics space, AI is not going to come over and go drive the truck and deliver that to the person and give them the touch and shake their hand and have that relationship with the client, right? It might do some parts of it, but not all of it. At the end of the day, that relationship and human interaction still needs to be there. So think of it as a tool, right? That you can use to help your business be more efficient and take it to the next level, right? But don't be afraid and learn, So what I do is bring other partners, for example, in this case, I brought an AI technology company that is looking at how to automate some of those processes that I described. But just, something that I never thought I would be leveraging. I hear, well, I learn about AI, leverage it. Well, here's one example where I'm just thinking about it. And I just happened to connect with the CEO of that AI company. And he told me, hey, I'm doing business with logistics company. I said, ha, come talk to my client. And so that
Mhm.
turned into a solution for the priority that he had engaged me to do work with, as a coach. So yes, it's just an example of, when I went into coaching, I didn't think that I would start leveraging all these other things and concepts, technology, right, to help clients. And you had to adjust to those things, right? I mean, whether you're a coach or a business person or a student, learn those things because the pace that we're going through now, things come up, and you gotta keep up with it. But don't think about as a threat or close down. Just be open,
Hmm.
right? And network with people because that knowledge will come in one way or another. Maybe
Hmm.
through a coach, maybe through a consultant, maybe through a friend, but be open to it because if you resist, you're going to be left to the sidelines. I tell people, right? You better keep up with the
Yeah.
pace of change and be open to learn new things. Yeah.
Yeah. And AI is a good example of a great upskilling opportunity for executives. We've seen that with the .com days, with Web 2.0, and now we've got AI. Is some of the fear of AI just because the pace of change is so rapid now?
Yeah. And, I mean, it sounds daunting, right? Because it's a technical word, right? AI talks about developing applications and technology and the web and agents and all these words that are new to us, right? But I think at the end of the day is really technology that takes a next level of intelligence, right? That developers kind of put in their logic that can help processes be more efficient than doing it manually. I can tell you something that I've learned too is talking to these artificial intelligence vendors. They are very good. So the one that I put in touch with this client of mine, they come from a non-logistics background, which is
Hmm.
very interesting, right? I mean, these are developers that all of a sudden they thought, hey, there's an opportunity. The founder was working for a company and he was having trouble importing and exporting the company's goods that he was working for. And he said, there's got to be a better way to solve this problem. And his brother was a developer and he told him about that. And his brother goes, we can look into it with this artificial intelligence. And all of a sudden, then they created solutions for that. But again, here comes an individual that doesn't have any preconceived ideas about the problems in logistics, leverages technology and solves basic problems of, efficiency, manual work, and makes it more efficient, accurate, So that's just amazing to me that, thinking a little bit outside of the box and not closing yourself out to saying, well, maybe we cannot do it or nobody's done it. Well, never say never. I mean, maybe
Right.
talking to people might bring ideas that you never know might solve problems that maybe haven't been solved. So, but yeah, and it's changing so rapidly, right? I mean, you see now courses that everybody can get better versed in technology on AI, and I don't know. If you keep reading that stuff, you'll probably be taking courses for the rest of your life on AI. But the one thing I tell people is try to apply that to something, right? Don't just learn and go become conversant on the buzzwords, right? Put it to action into something, right? Because that's how you're going to either benefit or create a new opportunity, right? So that's just my lesson learned on that. Is the amount of information that's coming to us and the number of things that are being positioned in front of us to learn is just daunting. But if
Hmm.
you don't do anything with that, I tell people, what you learn it for? How did you apply it? So for the good of people or for the better of an organization or for the growth of a company, whatever it is, just that's what I like about looking at things. Right? And what I enjoy when I go talk to a client is the problems are very much similar, whether that's one sector or another one. It's about processes, right? It's about people interacting. It's about, trying to go out and get better at what you're doing, growing, right? Whatever the product is that you're making. And that's why I kind of enjoy, having that background in logistics because that's what it's all about. When you look inside, it's about from taking an order to delivering it to a customer and everything that goes in between, right? And every company does that, whether that's making a product or a service, right? So,
Yeah, and I take a similar approach with my practice. I don't focus on specific industries, but I focus on emerging leaders and specific sizes of companies. That gives me some guardrails on the offering so that I can, focus better on the kinds of problems and opportunities for improvement that clients and organizations have. Now, that brings up another question about leadership. And we've been talking about leadership throughout this discussion, but are there leadership capabilities that companies are trying to build around logistics? And how do you, as a business coach, help support that?
Yeah, I think, like I said, a big part of the critical success factor for a leader is really how to engage his people, right?
Hmm.
Influence them, how to be influential to them, how to motivate them. And that's where I was talking about the servant leadership discipline that I apply. I think a big part of the new leaders now is how to actually motivate people and get things done through people, right? And that means, how do I understand what motivates them? How do I understand what makes them work better together? And how do they connect the dots on the bigger picture? Right. So communication is the other thing. So I think the new leaders need to be better communicators. They need to be good influencers, and they need to think in practical terms, right? Not just, concepts and ethereal things that might not really translate to the real world. Whether you're in a big company or a small company, I mean, companies want results. They want to show something, right, for what they're doing. And I think now more days, if you look at, companies are getting more, a little flatter in the organizations. They don't have the numbers of layers. They also are trying to work with people, to make sure that they're motivated. People are moving around more. They don't work any longer for one company their entire life, 2, 3 years, and then they jump around to another company. So try to retain them is a big thing. And how do you retain them? You try to help them develop themselves. You try to see what is interesting to them, depending on the type of company or work you're doing, and be respectful. Work, help them be successful. The servant leadership, what I was telling you, right? Ask them what ideas do they have? How can you help them get their work together, get their work done more efficiently? So I think influence, motivation, good communication skills are critical for new leaders. Um, and have that servant leadership mentality, right? Because no longer is like, I'm the top guy and I only talk to these guys here and not the other guys below. That doesn't work anymore. And the new generations look at it that way. They
Hmm.
have titles. They don't look at the size of the office. They just want a desk and interact with people, work, and they're fast thinkers, right? They're leveraging all
Hmm.
the technology we're talking about. So if a leader doesn't come close to that new generation, I think they're going to be left on their own, in their office, and just thinking that they have answers, when the critical success factor is to work with their people, right?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like my lesson, I guess, to people in leadership positions.
Yeah, and it creates that expectation, especially in millennials and Gen Z, of a flatter organization, a more effective organization where I think executives from different generations think about efficiency more than they should. If efficiency is doing things right, well, effectiveness is, are we doing the right things? And that comes through in the discussion that we've had so far. It's that shift in mindset with different generations regarding efficiency and effectiveness. And perhaps that drives some of the urgency to show results. You've brought up some really good points about accessibility and engaging with coaching. What are some other things that you've learned about making sure that coaching works at all levels of an organization?
Yeah, I look at things like, for example, communication, right? That's not just communication at the top level, right? The owner or the CEO or the C level people, but it's communication across the organization, right? I mean, when you think about the processes that a company has to go out and follow, right? From, like I said, taking an order to delivering the product and everything that goes in between, teams have to work together. And for that, they have to communicate, and that communication needs to be very clear and concise, with clear rules. And so what I think a coach's value is, and I think of this in the context of, we can help an organization understand the dynamics of that team. Communication is one of them. So for example, we leverage a disc as a tool,
Hmm.
and then, what the motivators and personalities of the different players are. And for them to understand that, and use that to their advantage or to flex it up, that's huge value, right? When you think of the example, right? I might be a high D and a high I, and I go out and present myself like that. And I'm in sales, for example. I present myself to every customer like that. I think I'm probably going to scare half of my clients or piss them
Mhm.
off because I might come across very strong. And because I might be selling to the same personality or the senior level people, and that might not actually get me through the door or build a rapport with them. Things like that, we can help them understand or interacting internally in the company, whether that's sales and operations. How do they talk to each other? Because they have different personalities, but understanding where they're coming from and coming together is important. So we help them with things like that. So I think that's how I translate that. Coaching is not just for the senior level or the C level or the owner of the company, but it's really for every individual in the organization that wants to develop themselves. Like I tell people, working on developing the teams, that could be communication. Working on growing the company, right? I mean, how do you actually come up with ways of how you can go sell more to clients, right? Working on how do you actually drive profitability, understanding where the numbers are, in terms of, people think that every customer is a good customer. Not really. Some customers
Mhm.
don't really give you the money or the profits that you want to do. And when
Right.
you start looking at it, you realize, yeah, maybe we should be focusing on something else. So all these things really start leading to it's not just for one level or one group or one individual. I think as a coach, you have a plethora of opportunities there in a company to go help them, whether that's in the sales, manufacturing, finance, procurement. I mean, all these organizations have opportunities individually or working together, as a team, right? And that's where a coach comes in. I tell people that, because they think, oh, you're going to help me solve all the problems. You know what? I'm going to bring my knowledge and expertise, but I'm going to leverage your knowledge too, because you know what you're doing there. You've been successful at what you're doing as an executive or as the owner of the company. So together, we're going to add up more than 1 plus 1. We're going to
Mm.
come up with 3, right? And that's the value, right? That's the value that I tell him. But don't expect that I'm coming here to give you all the answers. I will ask questions to try to kind of organize those thoughts and help you come up with a better solution. Together, is a concept of two heads think better than one or come up with better solutions than one. That's sort of like what I apply, when I'm dealing with clients. And they get it. Obviously it takes time for them to see. And that's why I'm saying results need to come out, and take it in steps. So you're not just working on some grandiose project that's going to take you a year, to get there, but just take steps, right? And try to get it down to something that they can see value, right? Because I think credibility is important as a coach, right? I mean, and
Mhm.
credibility ties to results. Credibility ties to building that relationship with the client, and relationship has to do with credibility. That's just how I look at it. Huge opportunity in organizations as a coach. There's many different ways you can go in there. You can do one-on-one coaching. You can do group coaching. You can do workshops. I mean, you name it, right? But I think all these are tools that we have and that we learn in our certification, right? That we can put at the disposition of that client depending on what their priorities or challenges are. But that's how I look at coaching. It's a huge opportunity. So yeah.
Well, how do you think coaching is going to change over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think, yeah, that's a great question, Bill, because yeah, I thought about that. And I think coaching, frankly, I think is going to get elevated because, it's all about the interaction. I think how coaching gets delivered might change. For example, we do coaching now online, through Zoom. We could do coaching workshops virtually. Who knows? Maybe in the future, once we create a certain content or course, we're going to be delivering that with AI, right? But I think what's not going to change is really that interaction of the coach with the client, right? That human
Mhm.
and that trust that you build, that human touch of, talking about specific things that come from experience and trust, right? I don't think that's going to change. I think that's going to be probably more elevated. However, I think that we need to do better at explaining what coaches do, right? Because I think sometimes it gets lost in the explanation. I think we get confused with consultants. we're confused with other types of coaches, life coaches and sports coaches. And when people think of coaches, they usually think of sports coaches. They don't think of a business or a
Mhm.
coach, unless you're a senior level that has had some interaction with one. But I think we need to do a better job promoting that and explaining that value of a coach. But I think in the context of how it gets delivered, the environment that will change because technology and globalization and all these things that we're dealing with. But that's always been the case, right? But how do we actually make it more, to explain and to promote that out there? I think that's where the big opportunity is for us coaches, to do that. Maybe the word coach doesn't really do justice to us, I think, but it is what it is. Maybe changing it might be there, but I'm less inclined to change the word and actually try to do the work of how do you actually sell and make it more better understood, you know? So
Mhm.
my take on
Yeah, it's going to be a continuing opportunity for improvement for coaches like us. Um, there's always the temptation people have to run to the AI these days and try that as a coach. And you're right, coaches understand context, politics, and relationships. Plus, there are things that you would never tell an AI that you will tell another person.
exactly. Exactly. Or that AI won't tell you, right? Because they don't
Right.
have expertise that you might have on something specific.
Exactly.
The way I look at it is you can go in AI and ask questions, but even when you get an answer, you have to keep fine tuning it to kind of come up with something. And even after that, you might end up with some aberration or something that's completely different than what you started asking it with. So you have to use some of that common knowledge and expertise, right, to kind of put things together for a client. I don't think that technology or AI really will ever replace a coach. I mean, the action, the trust, the knowledge, that I don't think that'll go away. Like I said, that technology is here to augment what we do.
Hmm.
Only gonna get it better, which I think is gonna be much better for us, value for us, and certainly value for clients. Today, for example, I'm coaching clients in different parts of the world, which in the past, I mean, it was coaching, it was one on one in person. If you didn't have this technology, you couldn't do that. I combine that with in person but we can do that. So, coaching is going to be more prevalent out there by the use of technology, right? So
Hmm.
the form and delivering will change, but the concepts and all this and the value of a coach will stay there. We just need to do better at promoting what it is and explaining. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And any closing thoughts for our listeners and viewers, Luis?
Oh, I tell prospects, like I said, I think everybody that is in, I think everybody could use a coach, whether it is professionally or personally, because at the end of the day, our lives are really intertwined, the personal with the professional world. And balancing their lives is really what it's all about, right? To maintain a healthy lifestyle and to maintain, I guess, harmony in the world, whether that's at work or with your family. I think being open to learning new things, to listening, to taking advice is very valuable. You can call it a coach, you can call it a therapist, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But that advice and that trust that you can get from a coach, it's worth a lot. It actually, people look at it as an investment. Yeah, it's an investment, but it's an investment that I think it pays off. I'd say give the opportunity to a coach to show you what value he or she can bring to you. If it doesn't bring, obviously you can always disengage, but I can almost guarantee you that you're going to get value, as a client. So I think needs to be better understood, certainly. So I think the value, there's no question in my mind, and working with people is always going to be there, whether that's technology is coming up or not. So we all need to embrace that and give a chance to a coach. There's coaches like you and I that certainly have a lot of knowledge and experience that can help individuals out there. But that's my closing comments here. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here with you and to speak to the audience. I think this is great.
You're welcome. And your viewers and listeners, hope you got a lot out of our discussion today with Luis Perez, Focal Point Business Coach. If you've got questions, feel free to pop them in the comments or contact one of us, and we'd be more than happy to follow up with you. And once again, I'm looking forward to hearing more from you and seeing you on as we take another step on the perfect route.